Welcome to the Shimano Library. Today, we pick up the rulebook and take a look at one of Magic's best abilities, banding. Yes, we all know banding is the butt of the joke when it comes to Magic rules, but just because people don't understand it doesn't make it bad. Banding is a keyword ability that has been abandoned by Wizards. There are a total of 41 cards that mention banding, and of those, 33 are creatures. The newest non-joke cards with banding are Banalish Infantry and Volunteer Reserves, which came in Weatherlight all the way back in 1997. And by abandon, I do mean that. The Storm Scale, which is a scale that tells you how likely it is that a new card will be printed with that mechanic, goes up to 10, with Storm being the titular mechanic all the way up there. Banding is a full 10 on the Storm Scale, and if that wasn't enough, Bands with Other is the only mechanic ever given the value 11. On the base level, banding doesn't feel like a powerful ability and just feels more confusing. The reason why it is so strong is just how well it can be abused and how versatile it is. But let's start with the basics. Let's take a look at the rules first and see how we can abuse it later on. The core idea of banding is that the one who controls the band controls how damage is distributed in combat. And that's it. Video over, you all know how it works, we can go home. You're still here? Yeah, no one's buying that. If it was that easy, we wouldn't be talking about it now, would we? It is true that banding is all about damage control, but there are so many little nuances that we need to take a deeper dive here. Like the fact that banding is two different abilities, banding and bands with other, and then there's also the fact that banding works differently when used while attacking and when used while blocking. Everything that applies to banding with others as well. The only difference is just how the band can be formed. Forming an attacking band is simple. You just have to think about declaring attackers in a bit different way. Banding comes into play in the Declare Attacker step. You take the first creature and attack with it. This creature does not need to have banding. Then you take your banding creature and it bands with the first creature that attacked. Then you go on with all the creatures that have banding you want to assign to that one band. If you have bands with others' abilities, those work just the same. They can band with others in the exact same manner if there is a creature that the ability calls for, and only one creature needs to fill the requirement, not the whole band. When you're done, you can call that group a band and decide what it is attacking. Be it a player, planeswalker, or a battle, all creatures in one band must attack the same thing. Now your opponent blocks the band just like any single creature. If they can block any one creature from the band, they can block the whole thing. In a way, band is always as bad as the worst creature in it. If one creature doesn't have flying, you don't need a flying creature to block it. If one creature doesn't have protection from green, a green creature can block the band. Now comes the part where banding starts to matter, assigning damage in combat. Normally, your opponent decides who their creature deal combat damage to, but with banding, you get to decide. Looking at this example without banding, opponent would just want to kill those Banalish heroes, but with banding, we can put 1 damage on the War Elephant and 2 damage on the War Mammoth. We don't lose any creatures and even get to do a little trample damage. Speaking of trample, that ability, as well as First Strike, works with banding. Just make sure you know who deals what kind of damage, so you know which damage must be assigned to a blocker and which can trample over. Here, we must assign all damage from the Banalish heroes to the blockers, but the damage from the elephants can be assigned to the player as there is already lethal damage on that blocker. And that's it. We've just used banding to our advantage and were able to deal with the opponent's blockers and not lose anything in the exchange. Now when the opponent starts attacking, we can use banding to our advantage as well. Even without banding, any number of creatures can block an attacker. To make that group band, all you need is at least one creature that has banding. To be exact here, The rules say that if at least one creature with banding blocks, it doesn't actually require that you have multiple blockers, just one with banding. If your creature has bands with other, then there needs to be the other as well blocking the same creature. And just like with attacks, when you block with banding, you get to control how the damage is dealt to your creatures. And here is where things get interesting. As the Magic rules are now, this is especially good when blocking creatures with trample, as excess trample damage isn't automatically dealt to the defending player, and you get to decide where it goes. You can simply assign it all to your creatures. This means that you can block a force of nature with a Banalish hero and assign all 8 points of damage to that creature. This way, you don't take a single point of damage. If a creature loses banding mid-combat, nothing happens. The band is already formed and will continue to be a band. Banding does not stack, and having multiple instances of banding does absolutely nothing. One creature can be a band all by itself if it has banding. A creature with bands with other requires that other to be present as well. If an attacker and the blocker both have banding, they both work. Attacker just assigns the blocker's damage and the blocker assigns the attacker's damage. Okay, so now we know the basics, and it's time for the fun stuff. It's the player's imagination that makes this such a broken ability. The big thing here is damage prevention. If you can prevent damage somehow, you can abuse banding. The easiest way is Maze of Ith. Attack with band, use the maze on one of your own creatures, and then assign all combat damage to that one creature. The maze doesn't actually remove it from combat, so you can assign everything to it and have the maze prevent it. Your creature takes no damage, but the opponent does. This also works with Ebony Horse if you don't want to use a land. The wording on the horse has been changed, so it actually works exactly like the maze and no longer removes the creature from combat. The second way you can do this is with protection from a color. White Knight has protection from black, Knight of Thorns has protection from red, Argothian Pixies prevent damage from artifacts, and so on. Have one of those in your band against the right color, and you can make sure the damage is always prevented. Or how about just using Uncle Istvan while attacking, or Wall of Shadows or Vapor when blocking? Those always prevent all combat damage dealt to them. Maybe enchant something with gaseous form and get the same effect that way. Or let's just skip the damage prevention and go straight to preventing death. Regeneration, both the ability and the spell. Again, one more way of making sure you get ahead in every combat situation. And you don't even have to think in just creatures that come with banding out of the box. That is what Helm of Chatsak is for. Just 1 mana to cast and 1 mana to activate, and any creature can have banding until end of turn. Just remember when activating it that the band must be formed in the Declare Attacker step when attacking and in the Declare Blocker step when blocking. I hope now you have gotten some grasp of what this ability can do and where you can take it. There are more ways to use it, especially if you start bringing in newer cards. Banding is an underappreciated ability. There is so much you can do with it even if the creatures with banding are weak. Just remember, not all creatures in a band need to have banding. And with that, it's time to shut the lights. I hope you found banding as fascinating as I, and maybe consider using it at some point in the future. Thank you for visiting the Shimano Library, and I hope to see you here again.